In the center of a decaying village, there was a fountain that no one dared to approach after sundown. Known as the Mirror Spring, its water was said to reflect more than just the world above. It showed what lurked in the shadows of the soul. The fountain had been there for centuries, its smooth granite base etched with strange, angular runes that no one could decipher. By day, it appeared ordinary, calm, glistening water reflecting the sky. But at night, it came alive. The water would ripple even without wind, and faint, unearthly whispers would carry on the air, speaking a language no one understood. One evening, a man named Richard arrived in the village. He was an outsider, traveling through the region in search of inspiration for his artwork. The villagers warned him about the fountain, but he dismissed their fears as mere superstition. That night, as the moon hung low and full in the sky, Richard decided to see it for himself. With his sketchpad and lantern in hand, he made his way to the fountain. The air grew colder as he approached, and a strange pressure settled over the square, making it hard to breathe. When he reached the fountain, Richard peered into the water, expecting to see his reflection. Instead, the surface was unnaturally dark, like polished obsidian. Slowly, shapes began to form, at first indistinct, like shadows beneath the surface. Then they became clear. It wasn't his face staring back at him. It was a grotesque version of himself, its eyes sunken and mouth twisted into a gaping smile that stretched too wide. The figure tilted its head, moving in ways he wasn't. Richard stepped back, but the reflection didn't. It stayed, grinning up at him from the water. Then it moved. The figure's hands pressed against the inside of the fountain, the water rippling outward. It began to claw its way out, its limbs bending unnaturally as it pulled itself free. Richard stumbled back, his lantern flickering wildly, but he couldn't look away. The thing stood before him, its grin impossibly wide, its hollow eyes fixed on him. It didn't speak, but Richard felt its intentions as clearly as if it had whispered them directly into his mind. This creature was him, his regrets, his fears, his anger all given form. Before he could run, it lunged at him, cold hands gripping his throat. It didn't try to unalive him, it didn't need to. Instead, it breathed. A shuddering, rasping inhale, as though it was sucking the air from his lungs, the warmth from his skin, the very essence of his soul. Richard felt his strength draining, his thoughts unraveling. Memories of every terrible thing he'd ever done, every lie, every betrayal flashed through his mind, each one sharper than the last. The creature fed on them, growing more solid, more alive, as Richard grew weaker. When he finally collapsed to the ground, the creature turned back toward the fountain. It looked at him one last time, its grin now triumphant, before diving into the water and vanishing. Richard survived, but he was never the same. His hair turned stark white overnight, and his eyes held a haunted, vacant look. He left the village the next morning, but he couldn't escape what had happened. Every reflective surface, mirrors, windows, even puddles showed a glimpse of that twisted version of himself, always watching, always smiling. And sometimes, when he was alone, he'd hear the faint sound of water dripping, followed by a voice that whispered from nowhere, "I'm still here."